question was one of your students.
Of course.
How weird is it that like someone that like you saw be like
He's
stupid?
still alive. What?
I mean, like, yeah, he still
What did you
has
say?
it. Oh, so like, okay, let me rephrase. How is
This
it
is
weird?
being recorded.
Yeah, I know. How is it weird that like a high schooler now works on a weekend?
There's like 12 of them or 15 of them that have.
Yeah, but like you knew him, like you were there when you.
No,
were at
no,
first.
there are students, there are many students of mine that teach here.
Did
It's
you
a
teach
lot.
Kelly?
Huh?
Did you teach Kelly?
No, I did not. But there are a lot. Huh? Yeah. Yeah, I had a class.
And
His peers
yeah,
I had in class. I had a lot of people in class, yeah. I'm gonna do it by the end of the period. I'm not gonna go, I wanna go over and answer, but I'll get back in the period. Don't let me forget.
Is it really? Don't worry.
You forget?
No.
Actually, people did well in this class. It's all A's and B's, I'm very pleased. And a couple of people, like, we get one, like, and people who did not do as well as they could, it was like one short ID, problematic, and I'll give you another chance to redo that, to get some of the points back. No, I didn't put it in. We got the Creek War, so we got Bladensburg races, we got blockade. Did we get to the treaty?
The treaty again?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Andrew Jackson,
You were just,
let's
you were like.
do Battle of New Orleans, let's get it done. Battle of New Orleans. So the Battle of New Orleans, General Pakenham, a hero of the Peninsular Campaign, one of the greatest generals in British military history. At the Tower of London, he is entombed with many of the greatest British generals in history. They basically have this massive mausoleum with little plaques with all these names of generals. And then, of course, Andrew Jackson, prominent Lord, militia leader, Horseshoe Bend, controversial man, but I think kind of fits in with a lot of American history. Fits right in there. I would say very good things and very bad things about him. Yeah. So with that, now New Orleans, here's the thing, as you can see from this easy to follow map. Here's New Orleans, Mississippi River. This is all Delta. It was almost impossible to sail off the Mississippi River. And even if you could, it wound its way 100 miles along the length of the river to get from here to here, which is only about 40 or 50 miles as a crow would fly. So the British landed up here, crossed over the swamp, and then marched up the Mississippi River. And the Mississippi River, all along it, were brand new sugar plantations. So they dredged the swamps about anywhere from 100 to a half a mile, 100 yards to a half a mile from the river. They dredged it, and you grow sugar in kind of swampy ground. So imagine you have the river, kind of flat, swamp, gators. Remember, got that? So there's gators. New Orleans is right here. To dredge it, what they would do is, slaves did it, ripped out all the underbrush, and then they dug channels, canals, all the way through so the water would run out. But it's swampy, muddy area. So New Orleans is right here. There's a nuclear power plant right here. So the British had to go around the plant. And that was kind of problematic because nuclear power plants get in the way. But then they could line up on there were no nuclear power plants. So the night of the 7th, the British encamped here, and the plan was by Pakenham to get up incredibly early in the morning. I don't know why I said it that way. No way! But get up before sunup, and it's January. January, wet, cold, miserable. Think about how humid it would be. The mini ice age is still going on. And so anywhere from 30 to 40 degrees, so that just enough, there's a nice layer of ice over that swampy ground. And then it just mud. And that's what the British were going to advance through. Jackson knew it. So he had his men dig a burn behind these giant silhouettes of fake men. But they dug, there was a canal. So there was a canal to drain. Then had his men dig an 8-foot burn on the other side. So the British would have to go through the canal and then up a burn. Clever place to do it. He had less men, but he had this really fortified place. He had some soldiers that have been with him for a while, militia, pirates, I mean, this hodgepodge of people. Lots of pirates in New Orleans. All along this line. The British plan, go through the Merc, diversionary attack, the main attack, just break through, go on to New Orleans. Take it, burn it, and remember, the war has been over for 2 weeks. They had no idea. And so they attacked. And the leading men, actually the first couple men in each column, and they marched in columns, were carrying ladders. So the first man would put the ladder over the canal, and I guess they kind of tippy toe on the rung. The next guy would put the ladder over the burn, they called. Did everyone get that image? Now just imagine how awful it would have been. This swampy land covered with a thin layer of ice, cold, terrible, and you're trying to run like this, and every foot just sticks. And then like the mud just sucked them in. And so the advance was a slow slog. Ooh, alliteration. As they attacked this way. And so Jackson's men couldn't miss. When they got to 100 yards, his cannon opened up a break shot. He didn't have that many, but they could not miss. And then as they got closer, they started mowing them down. This column here got confused and turned parallel, and they just set them up for a slaughter. Only a few men got to the canal, and hardly anyone got to the burn. Pakenham tried to lead one last attack right here, and was mortally wounded. This would be an unprecedented victory. Unprecedented victory. And the war was over. Now, the United States lost battle after battle. We talked about how effective the blockade was. Canada was a disaster. They burnt the US Capitol, but we won at New Orleans. And here's a painting of it, unlike with the massive cannon. Ironically, here, the diversionary attack broke through. Almost broke through. But it was the diversion. Here, the slaughter. Now, the British would take their soldiers wherever they fell, and they would bury them right there. Remember I told you about that at Lexington and Concord? So the privates, they just threw in the swamp. Sorry, privates. That's kind of the way private soldiers are always treated. They became gator food. Pakenham was a hero. So they brought his body back to the ship that was in Lake Borgne. His wife was on board. So his wife got, and he was going to go back for a state funeral. Before we get to that, 1 hour battle. You don't need the exact number. I just put it up there to give you an idea. What a decisive victory. Over 3,000 total casualties for the British, and about 80 total casualties for the Americans. Casualties killed within this. So a decisive victory. You don't need the numbers. I just want you to know. And Jackson is the hero. Jackson came out of this war with a reputation that it's hard to pass. And he had such an amazing life that it really fit into what many Americans wanted the United States to be. Oh, this is what it looks like today. They have the burn. They have some cannons set up, even though most of them are Civil War era cannons. Hey, they're cannon, right? And Chalmette was this big plantation right here. If you go there, it's really neat. But it is weird having the nuclear power plant just right over here. There's also a big Union cemetery from the Civil War that way too.
Is there actually a new one there right now?
Yeah. Built 1901. They hadn't split the atom yet, but they were ready. So with that, and just a huge victory. Now Pakenham, they took the body back to the boat, and he was going to go back to Britain for a state funeral. You take the body back, and that's what I told you. He's at the Tower of London. And so, how do you get a body back? Well, they had to preserve it in some way. Every Royal Navy vessel, all the way up to 1942, the U.S. followed this tradition until 1862. The U.S. Navy, they would get two drogs of wine, or two drogs. Sorry, I'm gonna say. The word is gone.
Aldehyde.
I want to say 2 little cups, but the word for a cup is gone all of a sudden. A grog every day.
It's
What's a grog? What's grog? Some kind of alcohol. And they would get about an ounce, they would get about 2 ounces of alcohol every day, every Royal Navy sailor. US Navy did this till 1862, the Royal Navy did it till 1942, the middle of World War II. And I guess both places, the US Navy and the Royal Navy, there was whiting on the ships. But anyways. So there's alcohol on board, whatever cheap alcohol they could get. And it was about 20% alcohol. They'd water it down. Rum or gin or whiskey, something, alcohol. Well, they had a barrel that was about quarter full of rum. 20% alcohol. So
They stick to body.
they kind of folded up Pakenham's body. He didn't care too much anymore, and stuck him in on the lid and took him back in 20% rum. Now it's 20% alcohol enough to preserve somebody.
No.
So they knew that, but it would be something. But there was bad weather, and about 2/3 of the way across the Atlantic, they ran out of grog. They opened up the barrel when they got to Portsmouth, and it was bone dry. And there was this gray thing in there. So that tells us 2 things happened. Are you ready?
Were they drinking the?
Number 1, men clearly got thirsty. Number 2, they were not picky. And so that's how Pakenham's body got back. So I was at the Tower of London, and if you get a chance to go to Britain, the Tower of London, it's a really great tour. In fact, right across the Thames, literally across the Thames, is the rebuilt Globe Theatre, Shakespeare's theater. It's awesome. But anyways, we're there. These tour guys are formed. They're British. They're still sergeants in the British Army. They call them beefeaters. I know it's a great name. And they're your guide. And the guy, he was a character. This sergeant major. And I'm standing to listen to him. We're in this mausoleum, and I just happened to look over, and right there, Edward Pakenham. So I was standing right next to the gray thing. You know what a mausoleum is? They basically just stuck all the bodies in there. And they put little plaques for each body.
Wait, can you see it?
Oh yeah, it came on surviving. No, all you see is a little plaque.
Oh, okay.
And behind the wall, that's what all the bodies are. There's plaques for all these officers. And I kind of looked at a few, but there's hundreds of them. So I wasn't really, I recognized a few names. I'm saying, yeah. So that's when, but I didn't get a chance to take a picture because literally the tour moved. I should have got a picture. So out of this is going to come nationalism, because there's this real feeling that we won the war. We, as in the United States, even though the United States by no means won the war. Unless winning is by not losing completely. But New Orleans made us feel like we won. And nationalism is an important concept, and it is new. It is almost brand new. Nationalism is going to come out of the French Revolution and then be accelerated with the Industrial Revolution. And here's this, that's what Oliver Hazard Perry. We owe allegiance to no crown. That's from the War of 1812. So nationalism, if you're not sure, make sure you have to know this. It's intense love for your country or your people. Your country or your people. And people could be, similar ethnic, language, religion. Your country or your people. But here's the big thing. Why? Why do you love your country or your people? Because they're your country. Because they're your people. Intense, I love my country because I love my country. Therefore, I love my country. Exactly. Nationalism is intense love of your country or people because they're your country or your people. And so if you already have a country for your people, it's intense love of the United States. Or, the French Revolution, it started with, we're defending France because everyone's attacking us and they hate and are jealous of France. That was of the French Revolution, this idea. Or in the Industrial Revolution, it'll really take off. This love of your country. Now, most people, when they say this love of your country because it's your country, they don't think of the word nationalism. What word do they think of? But patriotism is not that. When people say patriotism, what they really mean is nationalism 90% of the time. So let's get the definition of patriotism now, so we got it. The definition of patriotism is love of your country for what it stands for, its values, its beliefs, its founding, like the ideas of the Declaration of Independence, all men being created equal, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, or something like that. Now, the thing about that could be we might disagree on the values of the country. So you might have two patriots who totally believe and love their country for what it stands for and totally disagree on what it actually stands for. And people who believe themselves to be true patriots might criticize their country more than anyone else because they believe that their leaders or the values are going away from what it really stands for. One more thing, nationalism though is terrifying. Intense love of your country because it's your country, that's unquestioning love. Think about getting up nationalist spirit to go do, I don't know, start World War I or World War II. To rally people for war, to rally people to look around under every rug in every corner for potential enemies. Nationalism is scary. Not necessarily a bad thing. I'm nationalistic in some ways. I'm patriotic in some ways. Nationalism is a brand new thing in the whole epoch of time. So think about, yeah. Yeah. No countries. Countries as we know really didn't start till about 1560.
Like perhaps the exact terminology might have been different, but like in ancient times, claiming to be a kingsman or loving your kingdom and your country because it is where you are.
You're exactly right. That would be more loyal to a person or your value system. But
All
not
right,
necessarily.
someone loyal to the throne of X kingdom.
But one thing you got is you're talking countries as we know really didn't exist about it. So it'd be more loyal to a person or an kind of feudal.
Wait,
You see elements of nationalism, say in Roman history, Greek history, but we didn't have the same kind of like country with a people. So I know what you're saying. There's elements that are close, but nationalism we know is still really French Revolution.
UN.
Yeah. So, but we see elements of it. Yeah. So it's not. It's wrong to say that idea didn't. There wasn't elements of that idea around. But nationalism is just this country, and then the Industrial Revolution would create what we really know of the state will come out of it. So, and it's no coincidence that the Industrial Revolution might begin here. Okay, remember they started calling themselves Americans. That's a big nationalistic idea. This is our country. Next, American Indians, that threat is gone. After Horseshoe Bend, absolutely no chance. And what that's going to mean is every single battle that's going to happen after Tippecanoe and Horseshoe Bend is part of a horrific and tragic last stand. A horrific and tragic last stand. And think about Montana. Montana has one of the most famous battles of this, called the Battle of the Bighorn. And it was a victory for a coalition of Lakota and Cheyenne and a few other tribes. But it's an awful last stand. The United States is going to brutally conquer the land you're sitting on. Next, we won. Britain can no longer say, well, someday we might get it back. Then the Federalist Party with the Hartford Convention, gone. Also, no roads to get troops from the coast to or from Lake Erie to Washington, D.C. This would have triggered the Transportation Revolution. And the brother of the Transportation Revolution, they go hand in hand. The Industrial Revolution. That blockade kept British textiles from the United States. And that is going to trigger investors, creators, people, kind of lucky inventors to build the first textile mills up here. And the Industrial Revolution will begin here. So ironically, remember Hamilton wanted the Assumption Bill and the National Bank would try to get those things? That didn't quite do it. It'd be this war that nobody wanted at the end. And so this new nation will be created. A couple things that we need out of this then. After the war, there's a couple things we need. First one, that second bank of the United States. I put down National Bank, but more and more they're going to start calling it the Bank of the US. And Madison would be the president who signed it, the same one who was against it back in 1792. Shows how much they needed it, but it would only be a 20-year term. Nicholas Biddle would be the president of it. Remember what I told you about them down in his mid-30s, and how do they draw him? We will come back to Biddle. There's a bonus bill. So there was a bill to build internal improvements. So a road across Kentucky that would connect to the Mississippi River and then into Tennessee. Internal improvements are roads, canals, bridges, what we would call today infrastructure. A word that infrastructure is a new word too. And can it build in a state? Madison decided this was unconstitutional and he vetoed this. And the reason the bonus bill is important is because internal improvements, the United States government taking taxpayer money, the wealth of the people to build roads, canals, and bridges. Not just for the movement of people, but this is for commerce. Can it happen? This will be so widely debated. Yeah. And the Supreme Court, remember Marbury versus Madison? Well, it's still going. The Supreme Court's going to make some ruling. Don't worry about the Yazoo law land front. I'm not going to tell you about that. It's basically the state of Georgia trying to do a bunch of and get land speculators free land. But let's just jump right into the court case that came out of it. Fletcher versus Peck. Fletcher versus Peck would say that the Supreme Court can look at the constitutionality of state laws. So remember Marbury versus Madison said federal? Now I should add, yes, the Supreme Court said we have this power. Almost nobody agreed. And so they set this precedent, but it really wouldn't become crucial until after the Civil War. For today, we just now accept that the Supreme Court has this. And don't forget, I told you this with Marbury versus Madison. They don't just look at laws. They only will have this constitutional test if there's a lawsuit brought up. There needs to be a court case. Somebody has to be affected by a law who can bring a case up. So there are clearly laws that might be found unconstitutional, but there's never been a case. Next, Dartmouth versus Woodward, another really important case. Contracts are sacred and protected by the Constitution. The Constitution says contracts are legal documents, and it says, yeah, contracts are sacred. The government protects constitution or contracts. Now, when I mean contracts, I of course mean legal contracts. Contracts are a legal device created by states, ruled by states, even though private individuals do contracts all the time. But they are protected by the government. And with that, it's no coincidence you're going to have an explosion in banking, an explosion in industry and finance, new forms of businesses called corporations are coming, all because of contracts. Yes.
What brought this up?
Oh, there's a case, Dartmouth University had a contract about the land they were on, so that they could be there. And the state of New Jersey wanted to take that away. And they said, no, we haven't. And so, yeah, Dartmouth won. And so with this, here's the important thing. Contracts are written by two entities, or signed by two entities. Entity. Contracts always favor one of these two entities. Always. Which one? Exactly. Why did they write it? why were they able to write it and not the other entity?
Because they wanted that.
Yeah, the
Little
power.
like,
You're both right, and that's because they have the power, they can write it, they want to sign. Contracts always favor therefore what? Therefore, government will be on the side of the power. Not always, but that's what's usually going to happen. Has everyone got that? Which is going to be therefore who's going to get the machines will have all the power. Yeah.
I think it's that in legal terms, the person that writes it, if the contract is ambiguous in terminology, the ambiguity, favors the party that did not write the contract.
Now,
Now, yeah,
now,
I wasn't trying to disagree with your point at all. I was just saying that that should be noted, that there
Yeah.
is some.
the only problem with that is define what this ambiguous.
Yeah, that's.
And think about it for a second, all of you signed contracts. And you didn't write them, you probably didn't read them. Right? You've all signed them,
I mean, like the terms and conditions.
that's a contract. If you have Gmail, you signed a contract, you signed about your privacy. Does anyone, or the TikTok or any of those other ones, or what are the other things that are on there?
Yeah.
Do people who do Snapchat, do we even do TikTok? I have no idea. I'm on none of those.
Or like when you sign to do,
Okay.
there's a legal font that says the FBI. can access
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's, you signed, but the point is, you wanted it, they have the power, you signed it. Or you get a bank loan, you need the money, they sign the contract. Now, that makes sense in that way, but you could probably guess what this could also lead to. Next, McCulloch versus Maryland would be another one. This is about the national bank. And they try to actually tax the bank in Baltimore. The state did. And no, we're a federal entity with a federal contract, and the Supreme Court agreed. And therefore they said, Congress, they do have these implied powers. The bank is part of it. So this greatly expands this, but of course it's going to be undefined as it is undefined. Let's see, they defined it maybe the next 5 minutes, but not yet. It is still undefined. And fitting with this, Gibbons versus Ogden. This was on a shipping case. For steamboat, but federal government can regulate interstate commerce. If it crosses state line, the federal government can do this. Now, I know the Supreme Court said it, but it made it very clear that a ferry that went from one state to the other, who regulates the prices on that and whatever might be regulated on it, the federal government. So to get, the reason I went through these court cases, court cases. All of these ones, Margaret versus Madison, more powerful than national government. Gibbons versus Ogden, national government. Government versus Woodward, national government. You see what my point is? All the way. These are all strengthening the national government. And here's the banknote. And so a couple more things in really quick. This is also going to be called the era of good feelings. Because even though there's all these political disagreements just rumbling underneath, and the world is shifting. A seismic shift is happening, and a lot of people are only just kind of feeling it. They don't know what's coming. The Industrial Revolution. It's just going to change everything. The whole world's going to be turned upside down. But ironically, in this very, very divisive time, there's only one political party. James Monroe, Madison's Secretary of State from Virginia, a Republican, would be elected for 2 terms. In 1816, he got virtually all the votes. There were no Federalists down here. They're gone. And in 1820, there's no Federalist Party anymore. Monroe got all but 1 electoral vote. And the only reason he didn't get all is they decided Washington should be the only unanimous president. That's the only reason. And so it gave this arrogant feeling like, oh, there's only one party. We're finally coming together all for one goal, to make America great, kind of fitting that nationalist idea. Oh, I should add, almost every picture of Monroe, he looks like Washington. He looks kind of like George Washington.
Is that like on purpose?
Yeah. And they're both born in the same town, Fredericksburg, Virginia. So only one party, but it had massive divides. So in 1824, 5 Republicans are going to try to become president. And that will blow up into who's the true Republican. Hey, where's your phone? And so with that, a couple big achievements in foreign policy. There was the United States and Britain fought a war. In 1818, they came together in a very peaceful convention that basically laid out a few things, but the one we care about, that border, that 49th parallel between British Canada and the United States. Now, Oregon is still contested, so it ended right at the Continental Divide. That wouldn't be decided until 1845. And then the Adams-Onis Treaty. That's US and Spain. The United States took the claim of Florida. Also set up the same thing, the border here. This was vague, set up the border. In the United States and New Spain. I should add, why, anybody know why the United States wanted Florida? Oh, sure, we're the British might get it. But there's only gators there.
Right, like it's a.
That's actually a very good analogy, but not, even though Tampa would turn, and St. Petersburg was a really good harbor city, the rest of it, not really. Good analogy, yeah.
They wanted a place to do even.
Well, they always want to do stupid and or smart stuff, but here's the big issue. Like, slaves here were running away. They didn't understand how wonderful slavery was, and a lot of them were leaving. And they were going to Florida and having sanctuary. So they took away a safety valve for slaves. Get that? So there wasn't, no one really lived in Florida because it's hot and wet and yucky and swampy. And then air conditioning, yes.
So when they bought Florida, so it's like tournament slaves, did they like take the slaves back and put over there?
In the Constitution, it has a provision that says those who were fugitives from their servitude, meaning fugitive slaves, must be returned. Yeah. Last thing, the Monroe Doctrine, and I'll hand it out as we do this, okay? The Monroe Doctrine, all the countries in Latin America in 1819 to 1821, they all rebelled. They want independence. A massive Mexico, a Central American country that eventually broke up into the Central American countries we know, all the way down to Argentina. And the United States was worried that other European powers would come in and make them colonies, thus becoming a real rival to American trade. And so for purely commercial interests, the United States had no Western intervention in the Western Hemisphere. I'm sorry, no European intervention. But the US could not enforce this. There's Monroe. Now, doctrine just means Monroe just made a policy statement. It's not law. But Britain, their Royal Navy enforced this and made sure that, for example, France didn't try to scoop up part of Mexico, which they would try in the 1860s. Why did Britain want this? They would both kind of a monopoly, yeah. And Britain thought it'd be easier to exploit weak republics than French colonies. No one remembered this. The Monroe Doctrine would be kind of forgotten. It would be dusted off in the 1890s when the United States was powerful. And we decided this is our hemisphere. It's out of 80, I'm sorry, out of 79. So 71 and above is an A, 63 and above is a B, 54 and above is a C. Oh, 71, 62, 53. No, I'm not hanging them out. I'm doing right now. So 71, 62, 53. If you got more than 5 wrong on a short ID, I'll let you chance to redo them. I'll pass the test out tomorrow to let you look at them, so hold on to them, but I just want to get so many people wrong. I didn't want to look at it twice.
C4 of B.
Yes.
Why did you strip a wall over my test?
Because I felt like.
I don't know what to say, so they can keep it. But it's what they can't keep it, right?
Yeah, kill it, keep it. I don't know why it's good, but I'm gonna try to hand these out now. If you got more than 5 wrong on a short ID, I'll let you redo it.
I think it's. I thought you agreed on, I want to know what I did wrong, so I didn't.
I don't, I'm gonna go over tomorrow, but I just wanted to get it today. So you gotta look at your score.
Can I just give this back?
I don't.
I don't want it.
I don't want it either.
Did you want
No, hold on to it. But I'm gonna go over the test tomorrow.
Fine, I'll hold on to it.
All right.
Good. Oh, okay.
It was for you.
Oh, no.
That's okay.
And that's when you.
Hi, girl.
So I'm like.
Not miss anybody. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm like kind of in the spot. Like, I didn't say it like that, but
You didn't have to read.
like,
I want some. Give me some.
I'm kind of the spot. Yeah, like a lot of years of that. That was hard. I think it's the good one. No, it's really cool. Yes, you just have to have short. Yes, and it was so they say.
Yeah, so I told you this is like.
No, I was rather use my commercial photos. Oh, why can't they use it in their actual photo? I don't know. Like that you took. That's your ultra's longer. That's why. So, but they can be sure, yeah. Cause I can't say that. Yeah. So, yeah, but I don't know why. They have nice facts and this. I know.